time means Fantasy Football Night in America is live on the Better Sports Network. Week 16 is here. Welcome in to semifinal week. Hopefully you're not having your championship week. Hopefully you're not having your quarterfinals week. This is the week where dreams can be made, where you can get to your championship game, and we're going to try to bring you there tonight with our advice. Hey, hello, welcome. It is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show live on the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman. You know me from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, a.k.a. the FFPC. So glad to have you. We are going to be taking this all the way up until 9 o'clock Eastern time tonight, which means we'll be covering that first quarter roughly of that Rams-Saints game tonight, which is going to be a lot of fun. I want to tell you what's going on the show tonight. I want to tell you everything that's going on with the FFPC, but I would be remiss to not introduce my guest host tonight from Fantasy Pros, the incomparable, the intelligent, the well-mannered, and the clean-shaven Pat Fitzmaurice. Welcome in at Fitz_FF on the X machine. Pat, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Week 16, dude. How are your teams doing?
Eric, happy holidays. You were spot on with all that except the intelligent part, but I appreciate that nonetheless. Yeah, the teams are doing okay. We've got some soldiers who didn't make it this far, of course, but we've got some semifinalists still kicking, and a couple of them are rolling out Kyren Williams tonight. So we're feeling pretty good about that, I guess. That would not be a bad way to, bank hopefully 100 yards and a touchdown to start the semifinal. So fingers crossed, buddy.
Fingers crossed indeed. And I have Kyren Williams going in a few of my leagues. Dom Gazzetti already chiming in. A couple of Wisconsin cheeseheads here, which is great. Right. We love it. And unfortunately, Pat has gone to the dark side. He is an Illinois resident now, but nobody's perfect, as I always like to say. Let's do a rough cold open here. We see the cold opens on SNL all the time. Do a rough cold open with Kyren Williams. This is a player who is not Pat. He's not fast. Okay. He did not test well at the combine. He was not a draft pedigree guy. And yet this is a player that is going to help win leagues this year. Quite frankly, and I know you follow Dynasty, what did we miss on Kyren Williams? How is he in the spot where he is right now? And how has he been able to do what he's been doing when he's been healthy in 2023? I have him on a bunch of spots, but I don't have a good answer for those questions.
Yeah, I guess the only reason I wound up with him on teams, Eric, was just remembering the Rams and Sean McVay's commitment to Todd Gurley a few years ago and how they were just willing to work that guy into the ground. And, I was thinking that if there was another running back that McVay deemed worthy of that sort of workload, well, that could be a pretty valuable thing. And really, I thought it was going to be Cam Akers. I was pretty heavily invested in Cam Akers last year and to some extent this year. And then there was just this buzz, there was some interest in Zach Evans, although not a lot in the summer, just because I know Zach Evans had lost his job to a true freshman at Ole Miss, Quinshon Judkins. But, there was the buzz out of training camp that they liked Kyren Williams and that he was going to, be the backup to Cam Akers and maybe challenge Akers. So I just wound up the spots where I didn't get Akers, I took Kyren Williams. And the spots where I did get Akers, a couple of those spots, I got Kyren Williams. So I got a lot of Kyren Williams and feel really lucky about it. Because, when he ran that 40 time at the combine, Eric, I'm like, oh my God, he's small and slow. Just scratch him off the list of ever having any interest in this guy. And it turns out he's just really good at football. It's just one of these guys who doesn't time well, doesn't have the size you're looking for. He's just good.
How do we zero in on these players for 2024? Because I know we learned a lesson from Kyren Williams, but I don't know what applicable data there is to apply it to not only our 2024 redrafts, but our dynasty drafts as well.
Yeah, that's it. As far as the dynasty drafts, I still think the times are important. But for redraft, it was just sort of the importance of maybe keeping your ear to the ground in training camp and reading what the beat writers are saying. Cause the reports on Kyren Williams all summer were pretty positive. And that's sort of what led me to his doorstep, but I don't have him anywhere in dynasty. I'm still going to tend to dismiss guys who are that small and run, 4.7s or whatever he ran at the combine.
So he's more of an outlier for you.
Yeah, he fell through the cracks for sure.
Okay. And that's fine. And that's definitely a suitable answer. I'll be honest with you. The only reason I had drafted him in drafting season, July, August, September, and I'll shut up Fantasy Pros on this, is I see these blurbs on Fantasy Pros about, well, Cam Akers is the guy, but Kyren Williams has been catching a lot of passes. To me, if you're playing in a full PPR league, that's enough when you can get this guy in round 13, round 14, round 15 as a backup to the starter, and you're already catching passes. You're already in on third downs. That's who are you going to get with a higher upside at that point when 75% of your draft is already done? And that's probably why I got Kyren Williams on the teams I did. And I think that, again, Dynasty, we care about the profile. Dynasty, we care about the metrics. Like James Cook is showing why you pay attention to the metrics right now. We are seeing why that is. But as far as guys in redraft, because like you, Pat, I don't have a whole lot of Kyren Williams in Dynasty, but I have him a lot in redraft because he was so cheap. This is the kind of stuff that we're paying attention to. This is the kind of stuff we're going to try to guide you through tonight for the next 2 hours. This is the kind of stuff, honestly, when we, I think this time of year, and Pat, you're submitting rankings for Fantasy Pros all the time, every week. I think the biggest thing right now is not, well, who are you adding? Who are you dumping off the waiver wire? It's the thing where we're trying to figure out which studs are we sitting, if any? Which sleepers are we starting, if any? I think that's the big thing right now, and probably the situation that you're going through in your dynasty or in all your fantasy leagues right now is I don't want to screw this up. Like I want to get my right guys in there so I can win these leagues.
Yeah, and luckily with the teams I've got left, I think the decisions are pretty clear cut. And I think that's the ideal, that you've got your set starting lineup, that you're just rolling with these guys, that you don't have to have too many vexing decisions. I do have one spot where injuries kind of threw me for a loop, just the Michael Pittman thing and not knowing whether to start Michael Pittman. Mm-hmm. So I've got a choice. I've got like a wide receiver spot and a flex spot. And my three options are Chris Olave, Michael Pittman, Devon Achane. And
you could only start one of those guys or two of those guys?
Two of those guys.
Oof.
And, and like if for some reason Pittman didn't play this week, and it seems like he is on track to play, I have Drake London as a fallback. So I'm actually sitting Chris Olave tonight. I just feel like he and Derek Carr have just not, like, their chemistry has not been right this season.
And I think I saw this at Fantasy Pros. Don't the Rams give up a ton of fantasy points to opposing receivers?
They do. But like, I also know that Pittman has just been hyper targeted lately. Like I can't pass that up. And I've also seen the ceiling with Devon Achane, and I don't want to pass that up either. Like, even though he is sharing work with Raheem Mostert and kind of getting a minority share of the snaps and touches, like that upside is so spectacular. I just can't leave that guy on my bench.
This is the kind of game theory we're going to get into tonight because I think this is fascinating. Listen, Pat Fitzmaurice is going through the same exact thought process as all of us tonight, okay? So we are at one with everything going on with our semifinals. We all want to get to the championship game next week. We're going to help you through that tonight. I know Mr. Bakes-A-Lot has a question. We're going to answer that in a second. But before we get to that, I want to remind you that if you are out of your playoffs, if you're out of the Fantasy Pros Championship round, if you're out of the FFPC Main Event Championship round, go to myffpc.com and play the FFPC Weekly Challenge because we have 3 of them going for you. The Thursday Challenge, the Saturday Challenge, and the Sunday Challenge. Just choose 10 or 12 players if you want to play with kickers or defenses by kickoff of either tonight, the first game on Saturday, or the first game on Sunday. Only one player per NFL team, no stacking, $35 or $200 to enter. You can win up to $2,500. Now, you can do that as well as playing in the FFPC world famous challenge, a playoff challenge. MyFFPC.com is where to go. Again, no draft or salary cap. You're choosing 12 players in the postseason, which we don't know yet, but this is why you got to get your teams or your entries set so you can fill these up before the contest fills up. Get them in before the first wild card game. Watch them ride throughout the postseason. One player per NFL team. $35 to enter. You can win $100,000. $200 to enter. You can win $500,000. That's at myffpc.com. Shout out to our producer tonight, Tyler Soto, who is manning the all the buttons behind the glass. Pat Fitzmaurice and I are going to be taking you through the next hour 45 plus. Let's get into Mr. Bakes a Lot question. What's up, fellas? Would you rather start Calvin Ridley, Raheed Shaheed, or Jaden Reed if he plays full PPR? So this is a question that we're looking at right now. Now, Pat, I know you love the Badgers. You still love the Packers, right?
Oh, of course. Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay, perfect. So you probably do know regardless. Jaden Reed did not practice yesterday. He did not practice today. He's been dealing with injuries for like the last 4 weeks, dating back to, God, I want to say the Lions game. It was the Chargers game. The Chargers game is when he hurt his chest. So he's got to look at Ridley, Shaheed, or Reed. If we were to rank these players, rank these receivers tonight, because Shaheed's playing tonight, how would you rank those guys?
Yeah, assuming Reed plays, Eric, I would go with Ridley, then Reed, then Shaheed. Shaheed, we know, is not going to be getting a big target share, most likely. He's a guy who does a lot with a little, and he does have that splash play potential. He could connect on a big play tonight, but it's just kind of hard to count on it, especially with
You're playing with fire. You're playing with fire.
Exactly. Like there is a kind of low floor because, maybe he gets 5 targets and catches 2 of them for 17 yards. But so Ridley, I think with Christian Kirk out, Zay Jones most likely out this week. Like it's a pretty limited target tree for Jacksonville. It does seem like that sort of enhances Ridley's profile. And I know it didn't really push him to that big a game last week, but I think he's a little bit better play than Jaden Reed. And now we're seeing that Christian Watson returned on a limited basis to practice.
What? Did he really?
He did.
Oh, I got to look this up. I got to stay up on my Fantasy Pros news updates. That's unbelievable.
I just saw that like an hour ago. I was very surprised. I just kind of assumed that he would be out. So, he might actually be a better bet to play this week than Jaden Reed. So, not that Watson necessarily destroys Reed's potential fantasy value, but the Panthers have been kind of a tricky matchup for wide receivers. Part of that is that opponents have kind of been beating on the Panthers all year, and like the pass volume against the Panthers hasn't been real high. But the one thing they do pretty well is defend the pass. So I'm leaning towards Calvin Ridley here. I think I've got him maybe like 4 or 5 spots higher than Jaden Reed in my rankings.
I think the easy thing and I think I'm with you on this. You fade Shaheed tonight, okay? You're gonna roll if it's you got to start one of these guys. It's either going to be Ridley or Reed. I have no confidence in Shaheed doing anything tonight whatsoever. The YouTube chat is flush with posts right now. Uncle Andy is saying he buys his dad an entry to the FFPC Playoff Challenge for Christmas every year. And I'll tell you what, if you want to do that, that's fantastic because you guys can put that together. You can talk about it. You can figure it out. That can be a Christmas tradition every single year if you want to do that. And it's a low price of doing that at myffpc.com. Dom Gazzetti, let's go to him. Chalk this up to things I wouldn't be asking about if this was September. Tua Tagovailoa or Baker Mayfield. That's the quarterback decision that he has to make this weekend. Tagovailoa is playing against the
Cowboys.
Cowboys, thank you. At home against the Cowboys. And Baker Mayfield this week, the reigning NFC Offensive Player of the Week, is taking on the Jaguars, who we were just talking about. That game is in Tampa. Pat, between these two guys, I still lean Tagovailoa, but I don't think it's a terrible play to start Mayfield over Tagovailoa this week.
Yeah, not a terrible play, but unless we can set up the Jacksonville defense with Joe Barry as their defensive coordinator, Eric, then I'm going to go with Tua here. And I think what we like from Tua is that we just saw him handle one of the most difficult matchups you could possibly present a quarterback with against the Jets, who have really smothered opposing passing games without the best wide receiver in the National Football League. And Tua still played a hell of a game. The fantasy numbers weren't great, just like 224 yards and 1 touchdown pass, only because they were winning that game so handily that he only threw 24 passes. But as far as the efficiency, like Tua just was fantastic in that game. I think he completed like 84% of his throws. He just picked the Jets apart. He just didn't have the passing volume to really put up big fantasy numbers. So that does give you confidence, though, that, in a fairly difficult defensive matchup with Dallas, who I think ranks like 6th in DVOA against the pass, like I'm not backing down from Tua, especially with Tyreek Hill most likely returning this week.
So that was my next question. You think he's going to play this week as far as people making decisions about, guys like Olave, guys like Nakua, who are playing tonight? You're breaking ties in favor of Tyreek Hill.
I think so, Eric. Yeah, it sounds like they expect him back. Like that's just what I have read, that they are expecting him to return this week. I don't think it would be a shock if he didn't, if he does have a high ankle sprain, but it seems like they are expecting him back.
All right, so let's do this. Tyler Soto, our esteemed producer tonight, always chiming in with the tough questions. So we'll lead into what he is making, or the decisions that he has to make. Lamar Jackson, on the road against San Francisco this week, is one of his options. If he sits him, he could play Gardner Minshew in a plum matchup in Atlanta. Now, I don't know about you, Pat. Okay, I am a weak man. I think I've made this abundantly clear in all my shows. I'm a weak man. I can't live with myself if I started Gardner Minshew at the Falcons and he puts up 200 yards and 1 touchdown, and then Lamar Jackson goes across the country, plays against San Francisco Christmas night, which is going to be such a treat for all of us on Christmas night, and he rushes for a touchdown. He throws one to Zay Flowers. He throws one to Isaiah Likely, and he gets 300 total yards. I can't live with myself. No amount of viewings of Die Hard that night will be able to get me over the fact that I sat Lamar Jackson in favor of Gardner Minshew. I'm a weak man. I'm playing Jackson. What are you doing?
I'm playing Jackson too. I don't want to overplay matchups. And Minshew's a good quarterback too, but like he's just not on Lamar's level. And the matchup disparity would have to be much more stark than this for me to consider playing Minshew. People do freak out. Who was it? Was it a couple of years ago where in the fantasy playoffs, it was going to be Julio Jones against, I think it was Josh Norman was the cornerback.
Oh, yeah.
The Falcons got Josh Norman in like 2 of the last 3 weeks of the fantasy season. And the people with Julio Jones were freaking out about this matchup. And like Julio wound up just smashing in both of the matchups against Josh Norman. And but there were people who benched Julio Jones. You don't bench the great player. So I couldn't bench Lamar Jackson here.
And I think the thing of it is like, benching great players sometimes is the right call, but in the moment to do it is very, very difficult. In the history of me playing fantasy football, which dates back, almost 30 years now, dating back to the early 90s. I have never been upset about playing a stud or a player that has been performing very well for me, who didn't in the semifinals or in the championship round. I've never been upset about playing that guy in favor of a guy that was, maybe I should play him because of the matchup. Never happened for me. I don't know if it's happened for you, but I at this point, like, as you said, I don't want to overrate matchups, and I'll take you back. This is the one time I remember it working out. I was playing in a NFFC primetime championship, and myself and my 2 co-owners, we were leading the whole thing heading into the final week. And there was a decision between Kurt Warner and Phillip Rivers the final week. And Kurt Warner was with the Cardinals, and I can't remember where he was playing, but it was snow, it was wind, it was awful, right? And Rivers was our other choice. And Rivers was sort of like a fringe top 12, top 15 type guy back then, that year. And we thought about it, and we're like, what are we going to do? We ended up going with Rivers because we were freaked out about the weather. So I stayed at my girlfriend's house, my wife now, but my girlfriend at the time. And then I was going back home to watch the games at my place, which is about a 10-minute drive. In that 10 minutes, we started Rivers. In that 10 minutes, Rivers threw for 2 touchdowns before I got back to my place. Kurt Warner ended the day with I don't even think he topped 50 receiving yards. That is the rare circumstance where you want to play, whoever is your non-stud or whatever. But for the most part, and you can speak to this as well, playing my guys that have got me there usually end up working out more often than they don't.
Agreed. And we've been playing for about the same amount of time, Eric. I probably started playing about the same time you did. And yeah, like I can always sleep easy if I play my studs. And like if there's some mitigating circumstances, they're talking about a guy, maybe he's got like an elbow injury and they're not sure he can make it through the game, or extreme weather conditions like that. And it didn't really destroy numbers last year, but you remember that Saturday night game? I think it was the Bills in Miami last year, where they were forecasting blizzard-like conditions, and that gave a lot of people dilemmas because obviously there were a lot of fantasy relevant guys in that game. So, like, there are certain circumstances that might make me back down, but look, they're going to be studs who misfire every week, and we saw it last week with some good players laying eggs, but for the most part, I would rather go down swinging with my top guys.
All right, so a couple of more lineup decisions. We're going to get into the better cast coming up in the next segment. So we'll be heavy on the Rams and Saints. But for all of you who are watching this, trying to get our advice on Rams and Saints, we're going to do our best to get those out right now. Tyler Soto, let's chime in with him. He's in another league where he's in the league semis. This is a quarterback question. You got Matthew Stafford tonight against the Saints. As I mentioned, Gardner Minshew against the Falcons, or he can play Baker Mayfield against the Jaguars this week. So kind of a trio here. When you're looking at Mayfield, Minshew, and Stafford, I don't want to sound like a broken record here. I still think you play Stafford tonight. One of my mutual friends texted me tonight. Not our mutual friends. You don't know this guy. One of my friends tonight texted me, and he's like, "Oh, what about Stafford?" And I said, the Saints are a pretty good defense, but Stafford's been running so hot with especially with Cooper Kupp the last couple of weeks, and you throw in Nakua into this, and then the tight end whose name is escaping me right now, he's looked awesome. Yeah, he's looked absolutely awesome, and so it's really difficult for me to say anybody else over than Stat. Like if you're trying to figure out a quarterback to play tonight and it's Stafford or somebody else, chances are that somebody else is not going to be a player I like as much as Stafford. I really like Stafford tonight. I'm playing Stafford over Minshew. I'm playing Stafford over Mayfield as well. Pat, what do you say?
Yeah, I'm with you, Eric. I've got, I think Stafford is like my 10th ranked quarterback this week, and the other guys are in the teens somewhere. And it's pretty much all the reasons you laid out, just that he's been playing so well. The weaponry is really good. They've got Kyron as a change of pace, so it's not like, defenses don't have to worry about the run and can pin their ears back and go after Stafford. Like, they have a legitimate running game. So yeah, everything about this offense has clicked over the last, month and a half or more. So yeah, I'm all in favor of playing Stafford here.
Here's an interesting one, and we'll get into this. John Terry, who has won, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars playing in the FFPC, the FPC, and he has an interesting choice tonight. And this is a 1% question, but we're going to read it anyway because he posted, he's watching on YouTube. So he has Puka Nacua on his bench right now. Right now, in his starting lineup, he has CeeDee Lamb, he has Amon-Ra St. Brown, he has DJ Moore, again, tight end premium, Sam Laporta, and David Njoku. He has all those guys in his starting lineup. Pat Fitzmaurice, would you bench any of those guys in order to get Puka Nacua in your starting lineup tonight against the Saints? Again, tight end premium. How do you weigh in on this?
The only debate here is Njoku versus Puka in tight end premium, and that is a close call. Don't you agree?
Very close, yes.
But like, Flacco has been hyper targeting Njoku, and Flacco in his 3 starts has thrown 44, 45, and 44 passes. And like Njoku has just played such a big role after being kind of a disappointment early in the season, but man, has he come on hot down the stretch. In tight end premium, I don't know if I could go away from that. I think we've seen Cooper Kupp kind of reassert himself as the big dog in the Rams passing game lately. So it's been really consistently Puka getting like 8 targets a week, 5 catches a week, sturdy floor, but a little bit of a limited ceiling. I think I'd go with Njoku.
I'll say this. Last week, and granted, Tutu Atwell left the game with an injury, but I believe Demarcus Robinson, because of that touchdown, actually outscored Puka Nacua on the Rams last week. When you consider that and consider week 14 against the Jaguars, 6 catches, 91 yards, 2 touchdowns for David Njoku. Against the Bears last week, 10 catches, 104 yards, and a touchdown on 14 targets. Boy, it is really, really tough to sit Njoku in a tight end premium league. So, John, I will say this. You have a fantastic team. I don't think I would be starting Puka Nacua over any of those guys this coming week. Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Moore, all these guys are fantastic target hogs, right? And then Laporta you throw into it. You got to play him. And then Njoku is like right up there as a top 5, borderline top 5 tight end this week as well. So I think you end up sitting Puka Nacua, who I have been like, I've loved Nacua all year. It pains me to say it, but I think that's the right call. Mr. Bakes a lot. Let's go back to his YouTube question. Full PPR, rest of season, which is not very long the rest of the way. Breece Hall or Bijan Robinson. So the first thing I think of is like, okay, you got to find a way to keep both these guys on your team. If you have to cut one of them, I mean, I guess it's Breece Hall. I mean, I do like Bijan Robinson the rest of the way. But the one thing I'll throw into this is Breece Hall has been catching a lot of passes over the last 4 or 5 weeks. I feel like he had one clunker, Pat, in the last 5 weeks as far as catching the ball. Other than that, he's been great as a starter and a fantastic flex. Hard for me to pick one of these guys. I think they're both going to be integral in your lineups, not only in week 16, but week 17 as well.
Yeah, these guys, they both have their Achilles heels, and Bijan Robinson's is Arthur Smith and his and his usage and like the just bizarre disappearances, such as the one we saw last week. And I can understand why we're getting this question from Sir Bakes a lot after what we saw last week from Bijan. With Breece Hall, he has not had more than 50 rushing yards in a game since week 5. Eric, like they cannot run the ball. Like his supporting cast is just abysmal. Yes, he's getting it done in the, as a pass catcher, but to some extent, so is Bijan. Maybe not quite as consistently as Breece Hall, but Bijan has been sort of getting bailed out by his pass catching numbers too. Man, this is really tough. I think both of these guys are talented dudes in bad situations. I'm leaning towards Bijan over Breece.
Okay, as far as week 16 goes, like if you're just starting one of these guys, you got to play Robinson over Hall, right?
Yes.
Okay. And as far as like, if you have to cut one of these guys, it's got to be Hall. You got to keep Robinson.
Yeah,
right?
I agree. Yes.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Now, let's get into the $1 million question. Should we have seen this Bijan Robinson non-usage coming after what we saw from former Titans tight end coach Arthur Smith coaching the Falcons this year and knowing what he did to Pitts last year? Shouldn't we have seen this coming with Bijan Robinson?
Maybe, but wasn't he calling the plays when like Derrick Henry was getting 30 carries a game and was like,
yes, but he's a tight. The irritating thing here is he was a tight ends coach. Like this is a guy that should have taken Kyle Pitts to like the Kelsey Andrews stratosphere, and it didn't happen. So to me, like now I look back on him like, and I was stumping for Bijan Robinson all draft season. I'm like, there's so many people that are like, oh, he's a rookie. What is he? Well, rookies drafted as high as Robinson was. It's really rare for them to fall flat on their face. And to the point of fantasy football, Robinson is still producing despite this non-usage, but it's been so frustrating. And that's why I think, so many fantasy players are rooting for Smith to lose his job because the sky could be the limit, regardless of who the quarterback is next year for not only Robinson, but Pitts and Drake London as well.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's almost like Arthur Smith has seen Kyle Pitts as more of like a wide receiver, and he's been lining him up more as a wide receiver. And like that sometimes has meant that Pitts has been drawing like shutdown cornerbacks in coverage. And I remember a time last year, I'm like, God, I'd love for them to just line him up in line so he could occasionally get a matchup on a linebacker or a safety. But man, yeah, I'm so eager for the axe to fall on Arthur Smith and for them to get a play caller who can optimize. You spend draft capital on guys, top 10 picks on skill position players. And last week, Eric, they ran 51 offensive plays. Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts either got the ball or were targeted on 1/3 of their 51 offensive plays. 17 plays out of 51. The rest were going to God knows who, Tyler Algier, Earl Hodge, Michael Pruitt. Yeah, it's just brutal.
It's frustrating. And at least we know, like, now this is 2 years of data. So we know what we're getting. If you draft Robinson or London or Pitts next year and Smith is still the coach, you know what you're getting into. Yeah. You have nobody but to blame but yourself. There's so much we need to get to. Let's do this right now. So Dom Gazzetti is chiming in on YouTube. He's in a half PPR league. Achane versus Deontay Johnson. He's concerned about Achane's injury. I know he's dealing with the toe. And then obviously Deontay Johnson. Where would you guys go with this? Again, half PPR here. You're looking at Devon Achane or Deontay Johnson. Pat Fitzmaurice, what do you say?
Achane, no question about it, hands down. Just like the upside that we've seen before. Deontay is not getting hyper targeted the way he used to anymore. Like, he's averaged like 6.7 targets a game over the last like 5 or 6 or 7 weeks. So plus the toe thing, I know they kept Achane out of practice, I believe, yesterday. And it's just, it's following the same pattern they followed with him in last week's practices, and he played fine.
In your opinion, he's going to play. There's not really a question for you on that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any concern about him. I think they also held Raheem Mostert out of practice
they
the
did.
Same time.
Yes,
so, yeah, like, I don't think there's any worry that either of those guys are going to miss this game.
Because of all the great feedback on YouTube, Twitch, and what have you, we have gotten to literally nothing I wanted to get to this first segment. So here's what we're going to do. Let's step out and take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get through the Bettercast. Pat Fitzmaurice is going to help me set my pregame questions on the Bettercast app. So this is what I'm going to tell everybody to do. During this break, watch the break, but download the Bettercast app for free in the App Store or Google Play, and you can play along with us. And if there's time, we'll talk about the Colts running back situation. What's going on there? Why is Pat so much higher in his Fantasy Pros rankings on Taylor and Sermon than so many other people? Let's talk about what happens to the Ravens now with Keaton Mitchell out for the year. Let's talk about the Seahawks running back situation. Again, Kenneth Walker, a DNP on Wednesday. We'll tell you what he did today. We'll tell you what we should be doing in your fantasy lineups. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Pat Fitzmaurice from Fantasy Pros, Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Don't go anywhere. Download that Bettercast app, and we'll be right back.
Of the NHL games, I had a conversation with Coop A Fiasco yesterday when we were producing High Stakes, and he was talking about playing video games. And I, since he covers fantasy football, I said, "Hey, are you going to be getting the new Madden this year?" And he goes, "Yeah, I don't really play Madden. I play NHL." And that tells you, and it really does, that I do feel that the NHL game is better than Madden. I feel like Madden is overrated. The NHL game is so realistic. I don't know if you guys saw the trailer and all the new additions that they added to this game, but it really looks good. I tried finding all the games that I had of NHL, and I thought I had a lot. I only have 4 of them. And that's because I used to live with my my roommate and good friend who, got me into hockey, and we would play most of it in his house. So he has most of the games, but I do got 21.
There you go.
I got NHL 18. We got Connor McDavid up there. NHL 12, I think, was the start of the, new consoles for me. But the big one, the holy grail of NHL games, NHL 94 for the Sega Genesis right there. Look at that. Look at that beautiful cover. Look at it. Looks like a VHS tape. That's how good this game was.
No, let me stop you right there. So people, VHS tape, if you don't know, it's this like rectangular black plastic with the magnetic tape on the inside. Tape's this big. You put it in something called a VCR. For a little while, there was something called Beta. It didn't last too long.
Look at this cartridge. I mean, they're not cartridges anymore. They're either discs or those little memory cards. But man, that thing is thick, right? And
you don't even need a cartridge or a disc anymore. You can buy the digital version. And
then you got Ron Barr on the book. I mean, he used to be always in the intro telling you about the team and what was going to be happening in the game. So NHL 94 is by far my favorite game, sports game. I love that game.
We are back right now. I apologize for my tardiness. Sort of a recurring theme on the show. We are 25 minutes until the top of the hour here on Fantasy Football Night in America. It's the Better Sports Network's high-stakes fantasy football show. Eric Balkman here from the FFPC, Pat Fitzmaurice from Fantasy Pros, as we are in the championship round, not only of the FFPC main event, but the Fantasy Pros Championship as well. In case you are wondering what we're talking about this segment, we are gamifying Thursday Night Football tonight on the BetterCast app. You can check out Moose and Keith's game preview of the New Orleans Saints and the Los Angeles Rams, including some of their top picks and plays. And you can compete in our free contest by answering pregame questions, which are live in the BetterCast app right now. Tonight, during the game, you can predict what's going to happen. You can also test your NFL knowledge. Those questions that are going to be piped in through the BetterCast app will help you win tickets. When you win tickets, you can redeem them for authentic NFL signed gear and collectibles, and you can chat with all the fans about the big plays, top performers in the bus in real time. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to subscribe to anything. This is always free to play. Download the free BetterCast app in the App Store and Google Play. You have to be 18 years or older. So Saints and Rams tonight, Pat. Let's get into the BetterCast pregame questions, and I'm going to lead things off right now with Derek Carr. His total is set for passing yards tonight at 234.5. Where do you stand here? Well, not where do you stand, because we're not to that segment yet. But Derek Carr, 234.5. Does that seem like an over or an under to you against that Rams passing defense tonight?
Man, it seems like a really good line, Eric. Like, I know he's been under this in 3 straight games, but he's also had fewer than 30 passing attempts in 3 straight games, because in 2 of those games, the Saints just truck their opponents, their overmatched opponents. So, yeah, like, it's a good line. I just, for some reason, I have this weird feeling we're going to see points tonight, so I'm going to go over.
You're going to go over. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and we'll get to the total on this in a second, but what is it a gut feel that think
it is totally a gut feel. Yeah. And like Carr's yardage totals have been all over the map this year. Like, he has just been wildly unpredictable. And I know their passing game has not exactly clicked over the last month or two. But I have a feeling they're going to find some success, and it's not like they can just run the ball down anyone's throats. Like, the Saints do not have that good a running game. Like Kamara, really good running back, but as a pure runner, not so much as a dual run catch threat. Yeah, that's where he gets over. So, yeah, I kind of think they're going to put up some passing yards tonight.
Okay. Well, let's go to rushing yards then for Kamara. His total is set at 52.5 tonight. Now, if we look back on what Kamara has been able to do, he had 66 last week. He hit 56 the week before, 51 in week 13. So very, very close to that. 69. And then we get into the dregs, 42, 26. He did hit 59, 62, 68, 80, 51. He has usually been over on this total, throughout the season. He has missed it 3 times since he's come back from that suspension that brought him back in week 4. Is this another case where we say over on Kamara? Even though we're saying over on Derek Carr passing yards, are we also saying over on Kamara rush yards at 52.5?
I'm actually going to go under here, Eric. And it's tight. Yeah. So he's been right around this number for much of the season. Like, he is hewed very close to this number. He's averaged 58.3 rushing yards per game this season. But now Jamal Williams is back to sort of offload some of that, the running. Like, we've seen Jamal Williams, I think he's had close to 20 carries over the last 2 weeks, maybe 18 or 19. So, like, he is sort of taking some of that early download from Alvin Kamara. And, just with Jamal Williams now chipping in, I think I'm going under on Kamara.
And we do know, you probably already know this, Pat, but Kendra Miller not expected to play tonight. So this is still an under for Kamara. Now, this is just rushing yards too. So, like, he could still play into the receiving yards, something that he's been able to do to critical acclaim this season so far. So I think there's something to be considered there, but we're just looking at rushing yards. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going under. I mean, both the Carr and Kamara things, like, there's such good lines. I don't know if there's a good betting edge with either of those. I would not be putting down my own money on that. Like, but yeah, I'm going under with Kamara.
All right, Cooper Kupp. his receiving yardage against the Saints tonight, against a pretty good Saints passing defense, is set at 73.5. Now, if we look at what Kupp has done so far this season, week 15, which was last week, he hit 111. Week 14, 115. Then before that, 39, 18, 11, 48, 21, 29. Never close on those. But then the first 2 weeks, he came back from that ankle injury. I think it was an ankle injury that he was dealing with. Week 6, 148 receiving yards. Week 5, 118 receiving yards. Okay. So if that's the case, then we're looking at Kupp not usually hitting this number over the course of the season, but the last 2 weeks he has. So where do we fall in on this tonight, Pat?
Yeah, I'm going over. It seems like he is trending back to being the Cooper Kupp we're familiar with. And it's funny. I think he kind of broke out of this in that game against the Ravens, where it was like a tough matchup and rainy weather, and everyone was expecting him to just fall on his face, and a lot of people sat him down. But yeah, like 2 straight 100-yard games, 20 catches in his last 3 games. I'm going over here.
I already locked it in. So I think I would agree with you. Kupp seems to be, all these Puka Nacua haters, of which I've not been one, that we're starting to see the cream rise for them right now. Because Cooper Kupp, it seems like he's coming into his own. Stafford's getting more dialed in, and he's focusing on Kupp more so than Nacua here going forward. So I think there is something to be said for taking the over on, again, a total that is 40 yards below what he's hit the last 2 weeks. Right. Maybe the smart play is the over, which is what we're going to do here. Okay, flip to the other side of the field. Chris Olave, expected to play tonight. I believe he's active. When you look at Chris Olave's total, it's at 60.5. 60.5 receiving yards tonight is what we're looking at for Chris Olave. He has hit this number in week 13. He almost doubled it. Week 12, he almost doubled it. Week 10, he had 94. Week 6, he had 96. There's no question when he is running right, he is going to hit the over on this. Now, last week against Carolina, he played. I beg your pardon. 2 weeks ago against Carolina, he played, only hit 28 receiving yards, had the concussion, didn't hit his total, and then last week he didn't play at all against the Giants. Where do you stand, and what are we looking at with Chris Olave when you know that the total on the BetterCast app is set at 60.5 tonight?
I'm going over, but I'm not supremely confident in it because, as I mentioned earlier, it just seems like the chemistry with Carr and Olave has been kind of wonky at times this year. So wonky enough that, as I mentioned before, I'm sitting him for the opportunity to play Pittman and Achane over him in one of my semifinals. So not wildly confident about it, but I do think the over is the better percentage play here.
I think you're right. And I think as long as this dude's healthy and he stays healthy throughout the game, he's going to hit 60.5. The Rams give up a ton of passing yardage to opposing receivers, ton of fantasy points to opposing receivers. Chris Olave is going to be featured tonight, and there's enough of a relationship and a chemistry established between Carr and Olave that I like the over here. Kyren Williams, let's move on to him. We talked about him a little bit in the first segment tonight. This is a guy who is set tonight at 91.5 rushing yards. Pat, last week, 152. The week before that, 114. He only had 88 against Cleveland in week 13. 143 before that. Then he was obviously hurt. He missed a lot of time, but 158 yards against Arizona, 103 against Indianapolis. This is a guy who seems to be getting better as the season goes on. To me, this is a smash overplay, even though it's at 91.5. Am I wrong? How do you see this?
Totally with you, Eric. I mean, he's gone over it in 4 out of 5, gone over 100 yards in 4 of his last 5 games. And, the one miss was 88 yards. And New Orleans is better against the pass than they are against the run. I think they're 24th in DVOA against the run. So you can run on the Saints. I agree. It's a smash over.
All right. I don't think we didn't get to Stafford here. I don't think we got to Stafford. Over under 242.5 passing yards tonight, which is a little bit above Derek Carr, but not by much. And Stafford is throwing to, Nacua and Kupp plus Kyren Williams. We can't forget him out of the backfield. Higbee, and then the Demarcus Robinson, who got in the end zone last week as well. 242.5. Are you betting on the over against a somewhat quasi stiff Saints secondary?
Yeah, I am. It's like you said, good pass defense, but things have been clicking. I think we both are pretty high on the Rams offense right now. So yeah, and he's gone over 250 or has had at least 258 passing yards in 3 straight games. So I think the over is the right play here.
The over is what we are locked in for. The total points scored in this game tonight, Rams Saints, which should be entertaining. You know, the other thing that we haven't really talked about tonight, this is 2 teams that are trying to make the playoffs. And the Saints are fighting for a divisional championship here. Both teams 7-7. Both teams have a lot to play for. This game could go down to the wire. Does that make over 46.5 particularly enticing to you, Pat Fitzmaurice?
It does, Eric. Yeah, I mean, so many times we think we're going to get some sort of shootout between 2 teams with good offenses on Thursday night, and we get let down, and it's a clunker of a game. But I do get the feeling we're going to see points in this one. Yeah, it feels like an over to me.
Okay, so it feels like an over. It feels like that's what I submitted on the BetterCast app. And now let's go to the final question of the night. Which team is going to win the game? Now, Pat, if we choose the Rams, we get 10 points added onto our score tonight. But if we choose the Saints and they win, we'll get 15 points added onto our score. The Rams opened up as a 4-point favorite. They currently sit at 4.5. Is the extra 5 points enough for you to say, hey, let's take the Saints? Or are we going to play it safe and take the Rams to win at home tonight against the fighting Derek Carrs of the New Orleans Saints?
For me, Eric, yeah, I think I will take those pot odds on the Saints and take the underdog here and go for the higher reward. Like I think this game is going to finish within a field goal. I think this is going to be close. When I looked at I was looking today at the Massey Peabody rankings of where these 2 teams stand, and basically they had about the same Massey Peabody ranking. So like on a neutral field, would be a pick 'em. And I don't really think the Rams are a team that has a lot of much of a home field advantage.
Right.
So yeah, I'll take the odds with the Saints here.
Let's play the Saints. And I'm with you on that. All of our BetterCast pregame questions are now locked in on the BetterCast app. You can download this BetterCast app for free right now, Google Play and the App Store. Play with us tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. And hopefully you can win some tickets to get some signed NFL memorabilia and collectibles. That's all in the BetterCast app, free in the Google Play Store and the App Store for iPhone, iOS as well. Now, Dom Gazzetti is chiming in, and I'll be honest with you, I've been trying to look into the camera most of the night, Pat, so I may have missed what you're drinking. Dom Gazzetti wants to know, is that a Wisconsin stout? It looks delish, whatever you're drinking tonight. What are you imbibing in while we do this show?
Yeah, Dom, this is an Alpha Claus. It is a Christmas beer from Floyd's.
I literally had that like an hour and a half before we went on tonight. Alpha Claus. I did. Yeah, it's a Christmas porter. I have it every year. It's delicious. Yes.
It is. It's very good from 3 Floyds in Munster, Indiana.
Munster, Indiana. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Not to be confused with 3 Sheeps Brewing, which is in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, which I've gotten those mixed up before. But 3 Floyds, the Alpha Claus, they do the zombie dust as well as the gumball head, all very popular there. But
great brewery.
Good so bizarre that I had an Alpha. I had an Alpha Claus. I have to do 5 hours of radio on Thursdays, and I got done with the first 3 hours, and I went out to one of my favorite establishments locally, and they had the Alpha Claus. I'm like, let's do that. I haven't had it yet this Christmas season. We'll do it. It's very good. It's
really good stuff. Yeah.
And it's like not that I want to turn this into a beer show, but like certain porters and certain stouts, especially when you get to holiday time, to me, they're kind of overspiced. Like you get so much spice. And like, this is not one of those. The Alpha Claus is really chef's kiss.
Well, yes, exactly.
Okay. Let's get into some stuff I wanted to get into in that first segment, and we didn't get a chance to. Sure. I noticed, and I was kind of going through your Fantasy Pros rankings, as you know, how you relate to the expert consensus ranking. Let's talk about the Colts running backs here for a second. Zach Moss, estimated DNP yesterday. He did not practice today. Trey Sermon, we know, is practicing. Jonathan Taylor, full practice today as well. I noticed you're pretty high on Sermon. You're pretty high on Taylor. Does this mean you think that Moss is not going to play and Taylor is the guy you want to insert in your lineups this weekend, Pat?
It seems that way, Eric. I'm kind of, as of now, I'm sort of working under the assumption that it's going to be Taylor playing, Moss not playing, and Sermon backing up Taylor. And maybe Sermon gets a little bit of run because Taylor is, I don't think they're going to ease Taylor back. He hasn't been out that long, but, we did see early in the season, they really eased Taylor back into action. In fact, he was basically backing up Zach Moss the first few weeks of, upon his return. We're not going to see that. We're not going to see Sermon playing ahead of Taylor, but I wouldn't be surprised if Sermon gets a significant number of touches this week.
I think that the Sermon issue is not enough for me to say, okay, I can't play Taylor. That this is not going to be a shared backfield to the point where I have to sit Taylor. If he's active, I'm playing him. It's going to be tough for me to play Sermon in any circumstance, as well as Zach Moss. I think Taylor's the play here. I'm with you. I think he plays this week at Atlanta. Give me all the Jonathan Taylor. I'm on board with him this week. We got some breaking news from NFL Game Day Kickoff. Ian Rappaport tweeting out that the Jaguars, quote, are likely to play this weekend without Trevor Lawrence because of the concussion. Now, he is in the concussion protocol right now. This is what we're looking at. And if that is the case, and if he is out against Tampa, I know we had a Calvin Ridley question earlier. What does this do for your thoughts on not only Calvin Ridley, but guys like Travis Etienne, guys like Evan Engram, players like that, Pat, this weekend, knowing that probably not going to be catching passes from Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah, well, backtracking on that answer from earlier and going with Jaden
you
Reed,
and me
both. So, yeah, I mean, this is definitely a downgrade. CJ Beathard isn't the worst backup quarterback in the league, but it's definitely a downgrade. Yeah, I mean, this definitely diminishes the offense, and we've seen Travis Etienne's production really taper off, and a partner and I were in together on a really good team that at one point, I think during the regular season, won 8 straight games. But one of our engines was Travis Etienne, and he just collapsed on us down the stretch. And, his no-show last week was part of the reason we're no longer in the playoffs. So it definitely dampens my enthusiasm for any of these. I don't know if anyone on the Jaguars offense is going to be a slam dunk starter. Maybe Evan Engram.
I was just going to say, what about Engram? Because I think a lot of times these backup quarterbacks will focus on the tight end, and Engram is certainly an uber talented tight end.
He is, but now with the tight end depth, I mean, there's still 6 or 7, maybe 6 tight ends I'd rather play ahead of Evan Engram this week with no Trevor Lawrence. I mean, McBride, Kelsey, Laporta,
Hawkinson,
Kittle, Hawkinson,
Kittle probably, yeah,
and probably Njoku too. So that's 6 right there.
Which, by the way, who in their right minds thought in Week 16, Pat Fitzmaurice and Eric Balkman will be talking about the tight end depth in fantasy football? This has been non-existent, and this gets into a bigger, question. And I know you were just on JJ Zacharyason's show, and we can expand on, and I don't know if you talked about this, but you think about how we've thought about the tight end position over the last 10 years and how we have to look at it in 2024 with the ascension of Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laporta, Luke Musgrave to a certain extent as well, and Michael Mayer, who could be taking a step forward. We saw a lot of rookie tight ends do a lot of stuff that we didn't expect this year. And then you throw in the mainstays like David Njoku, Dallas Goedert, guys that have picked it up, Cole Kmet to a certain extent. And then the sort of new to the party, Isaiah Likely, Trey McBride, guys that are not rookies but are turning it on. All of a sudden, tight end, the depth, not a bad place to be, Pat.
Oh my God. We have talked about we've tricked ourselves into thinking that tight end was a deep position for so long, Eric. And we always, then you get into the season, it's no, it's still Kelsey, maybe Andrews and everyone else. Now, all the guys you just mentioned, what if the Falcons get a play caller who unlocks Jonnu Smith? You've got Brock Bowers coming into the league, who is instantly probably going to be a top 10 tight end right away. Mm-hmm. We have an abundance of tight end depth compared to what we have in the past. So it's going to be interesting. There are going to be a lot of tight ends taken in the 4th round, and boy, in the tight end premium leagues, the high stake leagues.
Now this is the counter argument to that.
The depth
Now,
you can afford to wait, right?
They could slip, right?
Yeah.
Like because with so many tight ends, and especially when you throw Brock Bowers in there too, now all of a sudden, and Brock Bowers will enter the NFL with less of a rookie tight end stigma that I think hampered Laporta and Kincaid and guys like that. He won't enter the league with that. Like, people are going to be on board. Wow, look at all these guys that did it last year. Why would I downgrade Bowers, in drafts next year, because I know he can do it. And he might be the best of all these guys too. That's the other thing. So I think, like, yes, the premium of, I should say that you're trying to get a premium tight end, like the price tag on that. Yeah, it's going to be important, but the price might actually go down because you might be able to get a guy in the 5th, 6th round as your first tight end in the FFPC, which is kind of unheard of. That could be a top 5 tight end. And like I said, with Trey McBride, I think we got to rope him in there too, because this is a guy that's catching passes like a bodily function in Arizona right now, which has been fantastic for sure. Let's do this. I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit. Keaton Mitchell this past Tuesday placed on injured reserve. Really unfortunate. Abib Agbatoba, who won the FPC back-to-back years a couple of years ago. I was listening to his show a couple of weeks ago, and he was putting Keaton Mitchell on the same plane as Devon Achane, saying that these guys are not as dissimilar as a lot of people thought they were. Now Mitchell is out for the year. So we shelve him on our IR. We hope for the best for Dynasty. We might be able to get him at a discount in Fantasy Pros Championship drafts next year. But what we have this year, Gus Edwards, who has been a guy that has been underrated by many of us over the course of the season, over the course of the last couple of seasons. He's going to get goal line. Then you bring Justice Hill back in. Justice Hill, a guy who has not been talked about seriously since he had that 2-touchdown performance in week 1, when everybody and their mother was bidding on him in Fantasy Pros Championship drafts to try to pick him up to make sure he's on their team. Pat, how do you look at this situation going forward? No Keaton Mitchell in the Ravens backfield, but they still have Edwards and they still have Justice Hill.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, Eric. I tweeted out my rankings on Tuesday morning because I tend to do them, like, finish up on those late Monday night. And someone immediately jumped in. I'm surprised you have Gus Edwards that low with Keaton Mitchell being out. Like, it's not going to be this windfall where all of a sudden Gus Edwards is getting Derrick Henry type workloads. Mm-hmm. I just think, like, maybe he gets an extra, 1, 2, 3 carries a game. But mostly, I think those Keaton Mitchell touches are going to Justice Hill, or maybe, like a little Melvin Gordon mixed in. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're necessarily going to Gus Edwards. And you're still left with Gus Edwards being this guy who, doesn't really catch passes. He'll get 13, 14 carries a game, but, like, you still need him to fall into the end zone for him to pay off. Like, the rushing volume is not going to do it and make him this yardage monster. He's still going to be really touchdown dependent. And by the way, I just have to add, Keaton Mitchell and Devon Achane, they are not the same guy, man. Achane.
Well, okay. So maybe I misspoke. He thought, combined with the situation, like if you add the situation rather than just look at them as who they are as a player. I think that there was a similarity there.
Yeah.
But to your point, and I said this, like, I draft in the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship every year in Louisville, and I do like 10 drafts in one weekend, and it's a blast, and I love it, and those are the majority of my teams. And one of my buddies who not one of my buddies, but he co-hosts my local radio show here in Northeast Wisconsin, he said, "Hey, how did your teams end up?" And I said, "Well, looking at my teams, I didn't realize I did this. If Devon Achane pays out this year, I'm going to have a great year because I have him on so many teams as my third running back." And the reason I drafted him, Pat, was based on rookie profile, based on what he could do, based on what he did in college, based on the combine, because that's all we have to go on. Like, we don't know what we have in these players, right? So I drafted him, and I feel like I got him at a good price. And when you compare Achane and Mitchell, situations may be similar, but to your point, which I think you're going to expound upon, they are not the same football player individually.
They're both really fast, and yeah, they've had similar roles this year. Achan's contact balance is like top 1%. That is the difference. Like Achan's contact balance. That's why, like, when I saw him in college, I immediately thought, like, this guy's Warwick Dunn. Like, he is Warwick Dunn with the speed and the contact balance. The guy who just, like, guys hit Devon Achan, Eric, and he is like, it's like a pinball going off a bumper. Like, not only do they not knock him off his feet, but it actually, like, moves him faster in a different direction. Like, it's one of the craziest things I've ever seen. The dude's contact balance is just insane.
How much have you, and I don't know, this is an unfair question. How much college football do you watch? Are there any running backs? I mean, as far as receiver goes, we know everybody's excited about Marvin Harrison Jr. Are there any running backs or any players you're excited about drafting in not only Dynasty, but in redraft next year, Pat?
Honestly, rookie running backs, no. Like, I'm pretty open. Like, even, I'm a Wisconsin guy. Braylon Allen, people are going to lose their minds when he runs a 4.4 at like 230 some pounds at the combine. But like, he doesn't have the footwork Jonathan Taylor had. He gets dinged a surprising amount of times for a guy that big.
A lot.
Yeah, not really a pass catcher. So like, I'm not going to be as gaga about Braylon Allen as some other people are. I mean, there are dudes I like. I mean, Travion Henderson is impressive. Trey Benson. Like,
I was just going to ask you about Trey Benson. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I like these guys, but I'm going to try to remain sort of agnostic about these guys until I see landing spots, to be quite honest.
The Braylon Allen thing, as long as we're two Badgers fans talking about it, the Braylon Allen thing is interesting because I never viewed this, and like the only guy I ever viewed from Wisconsin as far as running back goes that I thought was going to be something in the pros was Melvin Gordon. I never really thought much of James White, kind of wrongly, because he ended up becoming quite the pass catcher for the Patriots. Never really thought much of Ron Dane or John Clay or Terrell Fletcher, Brent Mott, like any of these guys. Like, I never really thought that any of these guys were going to do anything in the pros. Braylon Allen is interesting because he got started kind of earlier than everybody else. But Braylon Allen, and I'll push back on the pass catching a little bit because when they instituted the air raid this year, Braylon Allen was asked to catch a lot more passes. And for the majority of the season, he was leading the Badgers in catches, like over any of the receivers as well. Is he going to do that in the pros? I don't know, but it's nice to see. Oh, and I'll say this. Jonathan Taylor was another guy I thought was going to be fine in the NFL, and he's been more than fine. I would not put Braylon Allen at the Jonathan Taylor level, similar to what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be okay. The reason I like Braylon Allen is because I think he is going to come at a really good discount because I don't think he goes on, well, I know he doesn't go on day one. And there's a realistic opportunity that he doesn't go till day 3. And if you're telling me that somebody's going to take Braylon Allen in the 4th round of the NFL draft, everybody else is going to be down on him. I won't be. I'll be taking him at the end of the 2nd round of rookie drafts, early 3rd round of rookie drafts, and I'll feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he should go on day 3, but you don't think, like, if he weighs in at like 235 or 236 and runs a 4.4 that people are going to lose their minds? So NFL teams.
That's a good point. Like, but how many times, like, and I hate to bring like the college up because like there's a lot of people say, oh, how many times has a USC quarterback hit? How many times is an Alabama?
Sure.
You know, I think that's unfair. But I will say that I think it could work in my advantage for Braylon Allen being drafted on day 3 because people are still going to look at him like, this is a guy from Wisconsin, and I'm supposed to get crazy excited about him. So I think that'll play, like, rightly or wrongly, I think that'll play into the minds of it. I think he's going to run a great 40. The guy's an Adonis as far as athleticism goes. But when it comes down to it, people are going to look at his last year in Wisconsin. They're not going to consider the coaching change. They're not going to consider the offensive change. They're not going to consider, the fact that he was hurt. And they're going to kind of give you like, yeah, he could be all right, but I'm not going to get excited about him. Even if he runs and does all this great stuff at the combine. That's my personal opinion. You could be right, and I could be wrong on this. That's how I'm viewing it with Allen.
Yeah, that will be interesting, and I totally understand that could be the case. And yeah, man, there is a lot to unpack with that guy. And by the way, I had to add one other Wisconsin running back, Michael Bennett, who was actually a pretty decent.
He was a first-round pick, wasn't he?
I know we try to forget it because he played for the Vikings, Eric. But
the Vikings, yeah. Well, the thing with him is like he was all speed, and so if that dude got past the first level, he was gone. Like corners, safeties, it didn't matter. They weren't catching him, and he had a pretty good NFL career. Now, I will say that I was not as gaga over him as I probably should have been once he got to the NFL, but he did carve out a nice career for sure. Michael Bennett. God, how could I forget about Michael Bennett? My God, now I don't know how we get into college football, but we'll get into some pro football again. Okay, here's what we're going to do. So when we come back, we've already done the Better Cast. I'm going to find out where Pat Fitzmaurice from Fantasy Pro stands on players like Aaron Jones, like T. Higgins this week, Dontavian Wicks, another Green Bay Packer that I think we should talk about, as well as Dallas Goedert. Tyler Soto, our producer, has another quarterback question that is going to lead into where Pat Fitzmaurice stands on Joe Flacco this week, too. The suddenly resurgent Joe Flacco. Who saw this coming? This is why the NFL is so unpredictable. We never know what's coming. We never know what's coming on the Better Sports Network's high-stakes fantasy football show. Pat Fitzmaurice from Fantasy Pros, Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in 2 and 2 as Chuck Wooler reset.
What can we expect from you out there on the track tonight?
Listen, I have a wife, 2 kids. I have, full-time jobs. I'm never nervous. I don't even know what that word means. Can you explain what nervous means? No. I'm ready to have fun. I've never done anything like this before. I got asked to be a part of this. This is fascinating. Like, it's so cool to just look around and see what goes on here. So I'm just excited to get out on the horse. And you want trash talk? Is that what you're asking me for? No trash talk. I hope everyone does well.
All right. Everyone's going to do well, but it has to be a winner. So give me your trifecta. Who's going to come in first, second, and third? Your heat.
I will go Maria 1, me 2, Willie 3, Moose goes 4th.
Well, it's very simple. I won this event last year. I won my heat, and so the defending champ has to be the favorite. Now, that makes me a little nervous just because I feel like it's hard to repeat. There's a little pressure when you're the favorite, but that being said, I'm still optimistic.
So your heat, it's you,
yes.
Moose and Keith from Better Sports Network, and Willie Colon.
I think Keith might be my stiffest competition, and I asked for this because I actually recruited Keith, if you didn't know. So Keith, if you win, you're welcome.
Malusis is very good. I mean, he knows what he's doing, but I'm going to go with Maria.
Keith is waving to the crowd. He must pay attention because they're off. It's Mark Malusis going for the lead. Maria Marino on the outside, and now Keith Irizarry on the outside with speed, and they're 3 wide into the first turn. Woo! Mark Malusis is locked in for his life. 138 and 2. They're into the stretch. Sportscasters Derby 2. And still in front, Keith Irizarry. And now Mark Malusis is trying to squeeze on through.
Come on! Back! Come on! Let's go! Come on, dig it! Yeah!
Keith Irizarry. Keith, you did it all the way, wire to wire, over Mark Malusis.
Awesome! That was so cool!
The champ is here! Keith, what was it like being out there? Adrenaline rush, you were doing the Instagram Live, so there was no panic. You looked cool, calm, collected the whole time, and you won it.
I felt really comfortable. I did. Like, I know you were joking with me before. Are you nervous? Are you whatever? What are you? David, the driver, was awesome. He's like, we're going to win this. I said, all right, let's win this. And he said, let's go. Yeah, I just felt really comfortable. I did. It was fun. We're in the lead. I got Maria Marino on the right side of me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to beat us, right? And then out of nowhere, you see Moose coming up this way, and we feel him breathing down our neck. And I'm like,
Moose on the loose. Watch out.
Moose was definitely on the loose, and we just got Moose by a neck, a nose, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but again, all of this for a great cause, and it was absolutely awesome to do this. It was cool.
All right, Keith, congratulations, and no matter what, you could always hold this over Moose's head.
Yeah!
We are 51 minutes until the top of the hour here. What's great is we are 5 minutes away from live NFL football tonight between the New Orleans Saints and the Los Angeles Rams. We're going to take you through at least the first quarter tonight and get you everything you need to know with our semi-watch party here on Fantasy Football Night in America. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show presented by the FFPC on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, being joined tonight by my co-host with the most, Pat Fitzmaurice from fantasypros.com at Fitz_FF. Do I got that right, Pat?
Correct.
Fitz_FF on the X machine is an expert on fantasy football, but is the worst guy to trust on where you want to live in the Midwest because he went south of the border to live in Illinois. I'm kidding. It is what it is. So I'm so glad to be joined by you tonight. Now, you said, and I forgive me because I can't remember. You said when we were going back and forth about doing the show this week, I'm your second favorite Scotty person, right? Who's your first? Is it your wife? Is it your kids?
Did I say second favorite Wisconsin?
Yeah,
favorite?
second favorite.
Oh my God, who was I don't know who I was.
Could it be Braylon Allen from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin? I don't.
That is a good question. Oh man,
I thought you had somebody in mind, or maybe I misread it. It's not important. Because the fact.
Yeah, maybe I was referring to myself. Boy,
could be.
Yeah, that's a good question. And by the way, I'm not buried too deep here in Illinois. I'm only half an hour away from the state line, Eric. So yeah.
So if you're that close, are you pounding out like the water parks there, Gurney, where you got Great America? Is this something that you're just living it up with your family on that?
Yeah, no. The funny thing is, I think we've been with the family to Great America once, and my kids are deep into high school. Yeah, they weren't that into it. They don't go there alone with their friends even. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we do some other fun stuff, but yeah, even though we're 15, 20 minutes away from Great America, we've just not gotten into it that much. Long lines, hot days.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense too, by the way. It is not all water parks and roller coasters in hour number 2 of the Better Sports Network's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show tonight. We're going to get into a lot of fantasy football coverage. And by the way, the FFPC Weekly Challenge is here for Week 16 in the NFL. There's no draft. There's no salary cap, no convoluted rules. It's the same format as the popular FFPC Playoff Challenge. You can play in the Thursday Challenge, the Saturday Challenge, or the Sunday Challenge, 10, 30, or 100-team contest. Pick your players and just watch them ride throughout the week. Excuse me. You don't have to, you don't have to be able to make changes to, I got to sub this guy out for this guy or whatever. No, just let them ride, just like DFS. Results are determined by the total points accumulated by each individual lineup entry. You can play with the classic format with kickers and defenses, the slim format without kickers and defenses. $35, $200 are your price points on this contest for everyone. And by the way, new users will get $25 off their first FFPC entry of $35 or more. Just use promo code ALARM at myffpc.com. Promo code ALARM, ALARM, at myffpc.com. Let's get into where Pat Fitzmaurice stands on certain players in NFL, in fantasy football in the NFL right now. And I'll lead with Tyler Soto, our producer tonight. His last semifinal, he has a quarterback question. He had Trevor Lawrence, who we talked about is probably unlikely to play in this upcoming Week 16. So if that's the case, does he roll with Joe Flacco this week, Pat, or does he start Gardner Minshew? Joe Flacco is at the Houston Texans this week. Gardner Minshew also on the road against the Atlanta Falcons.
I would roll.
Hold on, real quick. I can understand the reasoning why you would want to play Minshew, but I think you are a big fan of Joe Flacco currently, right?
Which is hard to believe, Eric. But here we are, a dude who turns 39 next month, who has not been the unquestioned season-long starter for an NFL team since 2017, who has about as much mobility as you and I, Eric. And
way more so, in my opinion.
And it's...
Well, can't speak for you, but way more so than me.
And it's starting to look like he is going to be a late season fantasy savior. I mean, he is averaging 313 passing yards in his 3 starts for Cleveland. He has thrown the ball 44, 45, and 44 times in his 3 starts. Like, they're just letting him air it out.
He's not a game manager.
He is not a game manager, and he will throw the occasional interception. We know that, but he's quarterback 6 in fantasy scoring during his 3-week run with the Cleveland Browns. So ride the wave.
Ride the wave, indeed. And I'm going to play Flacco. I'll play Flacco over Minshew. And what's the touchdown to interception range? Isn't like
7 to 5, I think, since he.
Yeah. So I mean, and this goes back to the whole Jameis Winston thing, where like I was talking about this with a lot of high stakes players, like, oh yeah, we don't know if Derek Carr is going to play, and yeah, we it's one of those things where like you want to play Olave or you want to play Shaheed or Michael Thomas, a few weeks ago or whatever. It's like no. You want Jameis Winston playing.
Yeah.
You want Jameis Winston piping the ball downfield. The guy, at least to my knowledge, the only player in NFL history with a 30-30 season, 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions, which is crazy. But that's what you want. And I think you want Joe Flacco, a guy who, yeah, he'll check it down, but he's taking chances downfield too. So Flacco over Minshew for sure. Pat, where do you stand on Breece Hall? I host a fantasy football show Thursday afternoons in Northeast Wisconsin. And my co-hosts, I have 2 co-hosts, they were not as bullish on Breece Hall as I have been. I look at Breece Hall, and he's at home against the Commanders this week. I look at what he's been able to do the last few weeks. Breece Hall, rushing yards have been kind of pedestrian, whatever. But dude had 8 catches for 86 yards in week 14, 6 catches for 29 yards in week 13, 7 catches for 24 yards in week 12, 5 catches for 50 yards in week 11. Like, you look at all these catches, that adds up. Half PPR, full PPR, whatever. This is a guy you got to get in your lineups, in my opinion. Again, going against the Commanders at home this week with probably Trevor Siemian at quarterback. Where do you stand on Breece Hall?
Yeah, so I am with you, Eric. Like, I think this guy on talent alone is probably one of the 5 most talented running backs in the league, and he is just being kneecapped by a bad supporting cast right now. Like, and obviously, like, I don't know if they can totally overhaul their offensive line in one off season or, fix. Well, I think, a healthy Aaron Rodgers would probably, even though I'm not expecting Aaron Rodgers to put up 5,000 passing yards next year, but like he does kind of fix and stabilize the quarterback position if he does play a healthy season for them. So, yeah, I mean, he has 53 catches for 441 yards. The rushing productivity has been off, but like, I actually like that his lack of production in the rushing game is going to make him cheap in drafts next year, or at least cheaper than he should be. And, I'm going to take him. And by the way, Eric, just to mention, you mentioned the Jameis Winston 30-30 season. Late in that season, I went out to get my car washed, and like the Buccaneers were playing. I was listening to the Bucs game on the radio. The car wash is only like a mile and a half away. And in the time I was gone, he threw 2 touchdown passes and 2 interceptions in the time it took me to go get my car washed and drive back home.
Oh, you got to love it. You got to love it. Jameis Winston, baby. Never a dull moment with that dude. And I'm a Florida State fan too. So I lived the whole, the crab legs and, the whole women's anatomy thing that he did in the Florida State Commons where he shouted that out. Like, I lived it. This guy's a crazy cat. We are off and running, by the way. 12 and a half minutes to go in the first quarter. The Saints now have the ball at midfield, driving on the Rams. 1st and 10 now with 12 and a half minutes to go. Carr looks over the middle. He finds Chris Olave once again. Unbelievably, that is Chris Olave's 3rd catch of the game. And you are looking at Chris Olave 3 for 36 already. So if you played him tonight, you're probably happy. Long game, long way to go. We'll see what happens with Chris Olave going forward. Dom Gazzetti already chiming in. Chris Olave with 3 catches already. Let's actually, Dom is reminding me, let's get back to the chat room here tonight. Dom has to pick between Nick Mullins, Joe Flacco, and Jake Browning. He has Nick Mullins in, but he's constantly been debating himself still. So when you look at those opportunities for quarterback play tonight, or I shouldn't say tonight, this weekend, when you have Nick Mullins at home against the Lions, he's looking at Joe Flacco, who we already talked about, who's at the Texans, and then Jake Browning, who's at the Steelers. Would you lean towards Mullins over Flacco, or is it still Flacco for you, Pat?
It's still Flacco, and I understand Dom's temptation to use Mullins here. The matchup is really good against the Lions. The weapons are pretty good with Jefferson and Addison, but I don't know if he's going to match the volume Flacco has had, the 44 and 45 pass attempts a game. So that's where I prefer Flacco to Mullins.
I think I'm leaning towards that way as well, but I can be persuaded. I think that the body of work, it's been so bizarre to see what Flacco's been doing. And when it gets to be that crazy, I usually start saying, okay, there's something here, right? Like this is not a one-off. This is a trend. And so I'm going to go with the trend on this one for sure. Jim Parsons Jr., JPJ, hanging out on Facebook watching us tonight. He's got a question, and this is something I faced in one of my leagues. Ty Chandler or Aaron Jones? Who is it going to be this week for you, Pat? Are you playing Ty Chandler, or are you playing Aaron Jones against the Carolina Panthers?
I'm going to play Ty Chandler. He played 81% of the snaps for the Vikings. This is assuming Madison is out. I mean, if Madison is back, I think you pivot to Aaron Jones. But 81% of the snaps, over 20 carries last week, smashed it. Doesn't have quite as easy a matchup this week, but still have to like the usage. So I'm going with Chandler.
All right, and I have to. My wife is watching tonight, and I don't understand this. She said another one bites the dust. And I don't know what that means. Is my daughter sick now as well as my son? I have no idea.
Oh, no.
Which is so bizarre. So I just texted her, honey, keep the family conversation off the YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch chat on the show tonight. She said that my daughter is sick now. My God, Mother of God. This is the best Christmas ever, Pat. I'm at work right now. I may not leave. I'm just going to stay here so I can stay healthy this whole time. Ty Chandler, we're going to get into him coming up in the final segment of the show. But this is a guy that, my co-host for my local fantasy football show last year, Pat, was already telling me, watch out for this Chandler guy. I really, really like him. And I was kind of with him until the Vikings drafted Dwayne McBride. And Dwayne McBride was Mel Kiper Jr.'s, number 3 running back from this past NFL draft. And I'm like, okay, I got to slow my roll on Ty Chandler. But when's the last time you heard anything about McBride? And Chandler continues to be a huge difference maker in that Vikings backfield. I'm really liking Chandler going forward here, not only as a backup, but as a guy that if the Vikings don't address this in the offseason, maybe we're looking at Chandler as a big difference maker next year.
Yeah, it's possible. And he really is more of a modern NFL back. I mean, Dwayne McBride was more of a 1970s back, the big thumper who apparently also has a major fumbling problem, which might be the reason we haven't heard much about him.
One of the guys, and I have not checked the ECR, but I know your rankings on Fantasy Pros. You are way down on Derrick Henry this week. Derrick Henry at home against the Seahawks. Can you tell us a little bit why the consensus is way higher than you on Derrick Henry against the Seahawks, Pat?
Oh, good Lord. I'm 10 spots below consensus. He's inside the top 12, and I think I've got him at 20 or 21.
Right.
He's had 33 carries for 43 yards the last 2 weeks, Eric. It's hard to tell how much of this is because his offensive line is lousy, and they lost Peter Skoronski, who was one of the few good things they had on that offensive line. Hard to tell how much of it is because he's facing heavy boxes, how much of it is because he's just 2 weeks away from turning 30 and has a ton of mileage on the odometer. So regardless of the factors, I'm just not really interested in making further investments in him next year in DFS this year. And I'm kind of looking to pivot away from starting him if I somehow stumbled into the playoffs with him on my roster.
Pat, the last 4 years, I have made a stance that I am not drafting Henry. I am not trading for him in Dynasty. and it continues to bite me in the butt every single year. Now, I'm willing to do this with receivers. I'm willing to do this with tight ends. I'm willing to do this with pass catchers. When it comes to running backs, there comes to be a time where I'm like, you know what? I'm out. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with these guys. And I think I said this on the show last week with Bradley Stalder from Best Bell Fantasy. I said, I have made a new rule for dynasty leagues. Once a running back turns 27, I am shopping him for a first-round pick, and I'll take whatever I can get at that point because these guys just fall off a cliff, and if I get a first-round pick for him, I'm on board. Derrick Henry has been bucking this trend, but it sounds like you are on the not on the fence anymore. You are like, get whatever you can with Henry. It's over.
Yeah, and that's it. And I've been playing it the same way you have, Eric, where I've been fading him for like 2 or 3 years. And, it looked like it was too early a fade before. And yeah, it cost me. Like I didn't get him but it wasn't like I was passing up a bargain on Derrick Henry. He was still going for a premium price. Now I'm pretty glad that I don't have him this year because it does look like the bottom is starting to fall out.
Dom Gazzetti also said, this sparks a question when we're talking about Derrick Henry. Tyjae Spears or Jaylen Warren, if Tennessee won't see much run success, is this a Tyjae Spears game? And before you say, oh, that's crazy, why would it be a Tyjae Spears game when Derrick Henry's healthy? Well, we have seen several games this year when Derrick Henry's been healthy where Spears has not only outsnapped him, but out-touched him as well. Do you think that this is a Tyjae Spears game this weekend, Pat, when you look at the Titans?
I don't know, and that's the reason I have to go with Warren here because his usage is pretty stable and Tyjae Spears' usage is not stable. Like it is ebbed and flowed, and I think we can build in a certain touch expectation for Warren that we cannot automatically have for Tyjae Spears.
One of the other guys, Pat, that I think you were higher on than consensus, and correct me if I'm wrong, was David Montgomery this week. David Montgomery, who is playing against the Vikings in Minnesota, consensus would have him at 24 on Fantasy Pros. Where were you in on him for full PPR, and why do you like him a little bit better than everybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I think he is still a really solid running back too, simply because Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson is very committed to the running game. And because the Lions have a good offensive line and they're good enough to present Montgomery with a lot of run-friendly game scripts. So, I guess if it gets away from them, if the Vikings kind of spring an upset on them and win by multiple scores, yeah, things could go sideways for Montgomery. But I realize the yardage upside is sort of limited because Jahmyr Gibbs is really good and now he's getting more run. But Montgomery is still their short yardage guy. And he's still getting like in the teens for carries every week. And it's translating to a pretty safe floor for fantasy. He's getting like those 60, 70, 80 rushing yards every week. And your touchdown odds with him are pretty good.
Puka Nacua just caught a big first down from Matthew Stafford here on 3rd and 6. The Rams had it on their own 38. I'm trying to figure out. It looked like, 17-yard catch for Puka Nacua here. This is coming off a Tyler Higbee 22-yard catch. So the Rams are cooking here now in Saints territory. About 8 minutes to go in the first quarter. We'll continue to give you updates on that. There are so many other receivers that we have not gotten into that I want to talk with you about tonight. T. Higgins is the first guy I'm going to bring up. No Jamar Chase this week. So it looks like T. Higgins will be the number one receiver for Jake Browning this week. T. Higgins is a guy that made some plays last week. Fantasy Pros has him as a consensus PPR rank of number 18 at Pittsburgh this week. How do you fall in on Higgins, Pat?
I'm a little behind on him, I guess. I've got him at wide receiver 23. It's not really meant as a diss. But like there have been times where I know last year where Jamar Chase and like T. Higgins were both hurt and people thought Tyler Boyd was going to smash and it just didn't happen. And like all of a sudden we're seeing like targets go to Trenton Irwin and Andre Iosivas. Yeah. So like, I don't know. And it's weird. I'm still trying to figure out, Eric, whether T. Higgins is good or really good. Like I haven't been able to, I'd be interested in your opinion on that because I'm not, like it's not a knock. I mean, I think at minimum he's good, but And like, it'll be interesting if he does smash the next couple of weeks. If Jamar Chase misses a few games, T. Higgins is going to be hitting free agency, and it's going to be Higgy mania in the offseason.
Yes.
But like, what's your take on him? Where are you?
Here's the thing. Remember, this guy was one pick away from being a first-round pick. Everybody says, oh, he's a second-round pick. He was one pick away from being a first-round pick. And if I remember correctly, that was a tampering thing, like where he should have been a first-round pick, where a pick got taken away or whatever. So I think that you are looking at a situation where this dude would be a slam dunk number 1A receiver anywhere else. I shouldn't say anywhere else. Most other places in the league. But because of Jamar Chase, he's not. He is going to hit free agency. And let me throw this at you, Pat. There is one team out there that I think could be a huge boon to his fantasy production. A team that has been trying to find a number 1 receiver ever since they traded their number 1 receiver to Miami, that has been relying on a tight end, the most famous person. He's like the first man of popular culture right now. They've been relying on him. What happens if Kansas City says, you know what, screw it, because I think they could still be the number 1 seed in the AFC this year. They want to keep that going, throw a ton of money at T. Higgins, and Patrick Mahomes is throwing at T. Higgins next year. I think that's huge. I think it's massive, and it's going to show how good Higgins could be. I think he is a good receiver for fantasy production here. I think he is a borderline top 5 fantasy receiver if he ends up in Kansas City next year.
I love that. And that is the dream landing spot. I don't know offhand what Kansas City's salary cap situation is, but that's where we want him.
Just real quick. The problem is we know how the fact that they traded the fact that they traded Hill away kind of leads us into how they value receivers and what they've been doing and throwing somewhat, mid money to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, drafting Rashee Rice in the 2nd round or whatever, who's been great, by the way. And then, trading picks for Kadarius. So it seems like they're not willing they're willing to jump off the small diving board into the pool for receivers, but they're not willing to go to that high dive and go to T. Higgins. So I don't think it's going to happen, but my God, it'd be fun if it did.
Yeah, well, while we're on this, should we just jump ahead to Rashee Rice since we're on the subject of Chiefs receivers? Because, he is, I know you wanted to talk about him, Eric, and he is like this fascinating case. And I feel like there's sort of a widespread misperception about like what he is, because I don't think he is the number 1 receiver. You're right. I think they need a T. Higgins, or, if they don't have the money to sign T. Higgins, I think they need to draft someone late in the 1st round, a Keon Coleman or a Roma Dunze or whoever. Because basically Rashee Rice is having the kind of season I thought Kadarius Toney might have, like back when we were in June, where they are scheming up ways to get him the ball close to the line of scrimmage. His average depth of target is 4.3 yards this year. Like, he's not a conventional guy who beats defenders with route running and gets open downfield. Like, that's not Rashee Rice's game. It's like scheme him up a wide receiver screen and let him do his magic after the catch. And it's not to disparage Rashee Rice. He's really good in that role. And maybe he can be like at his peak, maybe he turns into like Chris Godwin.
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of player he is. Like, he's not like line him up in the slot and get him the ball quickly. But like, the Chiefs absolutely need a number 1 wide receiver because they do not have one. Like, Rashee Rice is meant to be a complimentary guy, and he's really good at what he does, but he is not like this alpha receiver type. He's just not that guy.
And it's hard for me to believe that Kansas City would go to the draft well again this year to try to fill that void. Where do you like? This is a good. Where do you stand? And I don't have it on the list, but I brought this up. I'm like, I talk to high stakes players every week on my shows or in private chats or whatever. Where do you stand on Travis Kelce and Dynasty? There is one league that I'm in where I've had Travis Kelce for years, and every single year, not Travis Kelce's fault, I always seem to come up short in the championship or the league playoffs or whatever. Where do you stand on keeping Travis Kelce around for another year?
Oh my God. Like, I think he has another good year in him. And if you look at, I don't know, the surface stats, the underlying efficiency stuff. Like it's been a pretty maybe gentle slope for him. Like maybe we are starting to see the decline, but it's been gentle. Like
It has been gentle.
It hasn't been any sort of precipitous drop off. And it probably does hurt him that they don't have a true alpha receiver, and like their best receiver is Rashee Rice, a guy who operates close to the line of scrimmage.
Right.
So, but it's funny, Eric, as all these tight ends have emerged. Like, I mean, I think early in the season, Travis Kelce, just because he was the only real good tight end, he was number one in my rankings in Dynasty. Now, because there are all these good young tight ends, I've probably got him behind Laporta, McBride, Kincaid. God, he's probably like fourth, fifth.
Well,
right
I mean,
now.
Especially if you think he's only got one good year left at that point, it's like,
one or two.
I hope it's two, because I will be the bag holder on Travis Kelce. Like I can't. I think we've come to the point with Travis Kelce, tight end premium scoring or not. You're looking at a situation where this dude is like, you can't get fair value for him anymore. And if that's the case, keep him on your team, roll with the punches, and that's what it is.
Pretty much.
We have a touchdown in the Rams and Saints Thursday night game here. On 4th and goal from about the 3, Matthew Stafford hit Puka Nacua for a 3-yard touchdown. So Nacua gets in the end zone. They may review this. I think he was over. I think it's pretty clear. And I think the Rams are going to be on to kick the extra point here shortly. Yes, they are. 2:28 to go in the first quarter. The Rams now have a 7-0 lead over the New Orleans Saints. We'll be following that going forward. Okay, let's get into Dom Gazzetti. We were just talking about Travis Kelce. I have to say, drafting Kelce in the first for the FFPC Fantasy Pros Championship helped me get number one in the placing in the league, but it was bumpy with him, and I helped myself grabbing Puka. Yes, if you have Puka Nacua, he has helped you no matter what you did in the first round this year. Like, that's just what it is. Like, Nacua has been a fantastic. I'm playing in a private dynasty league right now, Pat, with a guy who traded all his picks away, his dynasty rookie picks, except for his 3rd round pick and his 4th round pick this year. 3rd round, he got Tank Dell. 4th round, he got Puka Nacua. Thank God I'm not playing Tank Dell, but that is the way you utilize your 3rd and 4th round rookie picks here. So Kelce, in the first round of a tight end premium league like the Fantasy Pros Championship, that helps. But if you have other people to help you along the way, you do it for sure. We talked about Rashee Rice. We talked about T. Higgins. Let's get into the Packers here real quick. I noticed you were really high in comparison to consensus with Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Doubs. Is this just assuming that Christian Watson doesn't play this week? Is this just assuming that the Packers are going to light up the Panthers on Christmas Eve? Can you explain why you're a little bit higher on Wicks and Doubs than everybody else?
Yeah, it was not only that, but assuming Watson and Jaden Reed were both going to be out this week.
Yep.
So I was kind of rolling with the assumption that the top 3 were probably going to be Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, and Malik Heath. So that was it. But I will say, Eric, I mean, he's pretty good for a 5th rounder, isn't he? Like
Well, I'll say this just real quick, and you probably already know this, but for the viewers that don't, Dontavian Wicks, if he would have come out in the 2022 draft, coming off that massive 2021 season that he had, he would have been a borderline 1st round pick. He stayed another year, and the issue with him staying another year, he had to go through new offense, new offensive coordinator, new quarterback, new head. Like it was a bunch of new, and he just didn't adapt. He did not adapt to that. And then he got pushed way down. But what we are seeing now in 2023, we are seeing the addition of Dontavian Wicks in 2021, not the 2022 Dontavian Wicks. And that's, I think, what a lot of people overlook. This guy is not pedigreed in the conventional sense, but 1 year earlier, he would have been a massively pedigreed player, Pat.
Yeah, I just noticed earlier today, Eric, that he is the 28th graded wide receiver by PFF this year. Like 28th. That's pretty impressive. And I've been critical of Packers GM Brian Gutekunst for a lot of different things, but he has done a really nice job of stocking the Green Bay Packers wide receiver room with young talent. So
this was his best draft.
Yeah.
2023 was his best draft.
Hats off to Goody for that.
Mm-hmm. I think that the and we skip over this, but like Reed has been fantastic this year.
Oh, fantastic.
And
Yes.
there was an article on The Athletic today. Mike Sando wrote it, and Mike Sando posted that 98% of all the passing yardage, or receiving yardage, I should say, has been accumulated by first or second year players for Green Bay this year. That is tops ever. And the second place is 74%. And I believe it's when Steve Young was quarterback of the 49ers. Or maybe it could have been the Buccaneers. But like, think about that, regardless of who it was at. First place is this year, Packers 98%. Second place, 74%.
Yeah,
Like
that's great. I'm trying to think of who accounts for the 2%, like AJ Dillon and Josiah DeGuara,
well,
I guess.
Josiah DeGuara, AJ Dillon, Aaron Jones,
Yeah.
obviously would have something to be said about that. But you look at the receivers. I mean, it's Christian Watson, it's Romeo Dobbs, it's Dontavian Wicks, it's Jaden Reed, it's Malik Heath, it's it's like Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, like all these guys. And when you consider that it is a quarterback who, granted, this is his fourth year in Jordan Love, but this is his first year playing. I always say every week, I'm not going to turn this into a Packers show, and it always does. The sky's the limit for the Packers with the offense.
Agreed.
All right, let's do this. Pat, we're way up against it. Once again, one of my favorite guest co-hosts of the show, and we're just jabbing back and forth. It's so much fun. Let's do this. We'll get to some Week 16 start and sits, including but not limited to Amari Cooper, Brock Purdy, Devontae Adams, who's kind of a polarizing guy here in Week 16, Devin Singletary, and much more. Pat Fitzmaurice from Fantasy Pros, Eric Balkman from the FFPC. This is Fantasy Football Night in America with the Better Sports Network's high-stakes fantasy football show. We got a good 19 minutes left. Don't go anywhere. We're going to take you home into Thursday Night Football right after this.
From the Hometown Hero series, Zach Parise.
That is a very nice card, and that's one I'm probably going to have to organize a little trade ski with you, because I would actually like that card.
You got downtown Newark in the background. I mean, Newark has never looked so good.
No, it is not.
We'll put that back up on the screen. I just want to have a penny sleeve ready, and yes, we can absolutely work out a little trade ski for that, because that belongs in a Devil fans collection right there.
I'll trade you the Braden Schneider rookie card for it.
Done.
There we go. The first card-for-card trade on Rip and Riff history. And it was that easy.
It was that easy. That's because, because neither one of us are jerks. And it's the same thing when we try and do fantasy trades. Like, we don't try and screw each other. We have conversations. If there's a fit, there's a fit. If it's not, it's not. We don't try and, take the other one over the barrel. So there you go, in a penny sleeve. Hometown hero, Zach Parise. He was among the league's most productive goal scorers in 06-07 and followed up with a terrific regular season with an even more impressive postseason. And then they talk about what he did in the first round series against Tampa Bay that year. So that's off to the side for you.
That's true. And, if this is it for his career, he had a hell of a career.
He did.
Hopefully he comes back one more year with the Islanders, but if he doesn't, hell of a run.
We have reached the end of the first quarter in Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime. It is the Rams up on the Saints 7-0 based on a Puka Nacua touchdown from Matthew Stafford. This is Fantasy Football Night in America with the Better Sports Network high-stakes fantasy football show presented by the FFPC. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. He is Pat Fitzmaurice from the Fantasy Pros, fantasypros.com. Pat, I wanted to bring this up last week, and we did bring it up last week. Bradley Stalder from Best Bell Fantasy was on, and I said when we were closing out the show, I said, stay tuned next week, Thursday, 7 to 9. We're going to have Pat Fitzmaurice on from Fantasy Pros. And Bradley said, it's Pat's birthday today. So we gave you a shout out last week for your birthday. Nice. Yeah, absolutely. On December 14th, which I didn't realize. Maybe we talked about this, but that was your birthday. How did you celebrate it this year?
Oh man. Brad's a great guy, by the way. So hats off to Brad. Absolutely. So by working, Eric, that was about it. Thursday is a big writing day. I write my rankings tiers article. That's usually like 3,000 words. I got to write a player props article. I got to prep for a 9 a.m. Friday podcast. So that was kind of it. It was not an exciting birthday, but next year it's going to be on a Saturday, so maybe I'll get to live it up a little more.
Right. Exactly. You know, it's funny. My wife and I are celebrating tomorrow. We are celebrating 11 years of wedded bliss.
Oh, nice.
And
Happy anniversary, Eric.
thank you so much. And we have 2 kids that are sick.
Yeah.
And so I have a feeling how we're sick. Like I do a live show Friday night, so I know what's going to happen. And Saturday, we normally go out with a couple to celebrate stuff like this. And they're like, we don't want to have anything to do with you because
Right before the holidays.
Oh, right, exactly. So now we're going to have to find something else to do on Saturday. It's going to be fun. I think it's going to involve watching the Saturday night football game on Peacock, which, you know, my wife will find something to do or find some sort of interest in it, which is going to be good for her going forward. Dom Gazzetti, Balky almost lost his cat the other day. That is true. When we were doing this show last week, one of my cats was missing. We found it. It's all good. No worries on that. Let's talk about what we were talking about before we went to break, Dontavian Wicks. Dom Gazzetti said he looked it up. Wicks jumped up from a 41% route participation in week 14 to 76% last week. Now, Christian Watson obviously had something to do with that, obviously. But when you look at the fact that you're trying to win fantasy titles, Dom says, look, name brands are kind of out the window at this point. Sure. You have to look for guys that are actually performing. I don't know if Wicks applies this week. And my concern is this. Carolina has not been good this year, and Bryce Young has been really bad when he gets pressure. Been historically bad when he gets pressure. And I think with Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley Enagbare, Preston Smith, the Packers are more than able to send pressure at him. What happens if the Packers get up 10-0, Pat? What happens if they get up 14-0 or 17-0? How does Dontavian Wicks figure into this? Because now I think you're rolling the dice to see what he can do in the second half of this game. And I'm not saying like the odds are going to say that the Packers get up by 10 or 14 or 17 in this game, but if they do, Wicks is kind of a miss at that point, right?
That's kind of it. It's hard to see a game script where the Packers are throwing it 40 times. And even if like maybe if both Christian Watson and Jaden Reed were out and it was just down, but even then,
no, I think then it makes sense. If it's like Wicks and Malik Heath or Romeo Dobbs or whatever, like then I think you can make a case for it.
It would need both of those guys being out for it to happen. And we saw Watson return to practice, and we don't know if Reed's going to be out, and we've still got chopped up targets between Romeo Dobbs and Tucker Kraft and the backs. And so it's kind of dicey here. As you, to your point, Eric, I don't see a game where the Packers are throwing it 40 times against Carolina, and they're terrible run defense, by the way. Like this could be a sneaky good Aaron Jones game.
This is a battle of the terrible run defenses. Like I like Hubbard in this.
Oh, big time. Big time.
Yeah. And the thing, and here's the reverse side of it. What happens if the Panthers get up 6-0 or 7-0 or 10? Like all of a sudden, Chuba Hubbard looks like a pretty good start too. I think that's what we got to keep in mind. All right, moving on. Let's talk about Week 16 lineup advice here, and I'm going to jump around, Pat, with apologies to you on the show rundown. I want to pick up the sexiest ones here. What about Amari Cooper versus Garrett Wilson this week? Amari Cooper is at Houston, and Garrett Wilson is at home against the Commanders. The Jets could be utilizing Trevor Siemian throwing the ball to Garrett Wilson. If you can only play one of these guys, again, in the Fantasy Pros Championship round, where you're trying to win $1 million, would you rather play Cooper? Would you rather play Wilson?
It's really close, and I think there's the quarterback advantage for Cooper, but I think there's a matchup advantage for Wilson with the Commanders, who've given up like 10 yards per target to wide receivers this season or something crazy. And I do think Wilson is the better player. Like I think he's special. Amari Cooper, really good still, but I don't know if he's special. I've got Cooper like ranked 2 spots behind Garrett Wilson.
So it's very close.
Really close call.
Close. Yeah. Just selfishly, when I was submitting my lineups today in all my leagues, I noticed I had to take Aaron Rodgers off IR in a lot of my dynasty leagues because he's not on IR anymore. Where do you stand? Like, what's going to happen with the Jets next year? Are you bullish on Garrett Wilson if Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback? Are you nervous about Aaron Rodgers being the quarterback all season? What's the proper way in Dynasty to deploy, or not to deploy, but but what's the proper way in Dynasty to roster guys like Rodgers and Wilson? Go out and get them right now, sell them, stand pat. How do you handle
Yeah,
this?
I mean, like if it's super flex, I could see having Rodgers and not be like I'm not giving up a first round pick for him, but like
Right.
you know, put it this way, I just did my first pass at redraft rankings for quarterbacks last night or 2 nights ago, and I had Aaron Rodgers like QB 24. Like because,
For next year?
yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
You think
Why
does that seem
to
low?
me, that strikes me as low. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't run anymore. I
Correct.
think we saw that at the end of his career in Green Bay, like he's probably more of a game manager than a guy who you're going to let it rip 40 times. And
Now you say game manager, but bear in mind that he had that broken thumb most of the season too.
sure, but I think like he is going to work.
And I'm not trying to like put you in a
Oh,
spot.
I know.
I'm genuinely trying to figure this out myself.
The other thing is, Eric, like I think we can still project the Jets to have a really good defense next year. So I don't think we're going to see Aaron Rodgers in a lot of shootouts. And I was below consensus on him in this year's draft rankings for that reason. I just didn't see a lot of shootouts. I thought, most weeks you're just needing him to throw 28 to 32 times.
And I guess that makes sense too. So like he's more of like, I don't want to say like game manager, but maybe fantasy game manager, right? Where you have limited upside, but this guy's going to churn out 200 plus yards and 2 touchdowns on most weeks.
Yeah, I mean,
but he's not going to light it up for you, though.
That's it. I didn't mean game manager as far as a guy who's like not throwing past the sticks most time. Like he can still, the arm talent is still crazy, but I just don't think he's going to need to throw and get into a lot of shootouts with that defense being so.
All right, so let's get into a question that is facing at least one of our viewers tonight. Dak Prescott, this is week 16, Pat. Dak Prescott or Brock Purdy? Prescott is at the Dolphins this week. Brock Purdy is at home on Christmas night against the Baltimore Ravens. You can only play one. Who's it going to be, Prescott or Purdy?
I'm going with Purdy. I think the floor is safer, and I think we saw that the floor isn't necessarily safe with Dak Prescott last week. Neither one really has an easier matchup, but I have more faith in the 49ers offense and, Purdy's weaponry, which is just insane. Debo, Ayuk, McCaffrey, Kittle, those guys can do so much for him and pick up so many yards after the catch that, like Dak's been terrific, but I think the infrastructure for Purdy is so much better that I have to lean with him.
Bill Hollywood is also chiming in with Dak Prescott here on the show tonight. Let me ask you this, and I like I said, I know I said in the hour number 1 tonight, you were just on JJ's Zach Reason show, and I don't know if you got into this, but what about the fact that the 49ers have been so good with drafting a quarterback that was kind of an afterthought, right? 7th round, Mr. Irrelevant, last pick of the draft. They've been so good because they've supplied this quarterback with a great tight end, 2 really good receivers, one who is kind of a receiver / running back, and an otherworldly running back. Do you think going forward in the NFL, we're going to see more of this, where the NFL and the decision makers for each team is going to put more of an emphasis on the players around the quarterback, given that that the lack of I've said this multiple times, there are not 32 people on the planet that can play quarterback in the NFL. Given that NFL teams know this, wouldn't it behoove them to supply whoever they have at quarterback with difference makers, with weapons, that this quarterback can play in a Kyle Shanahan-esque offense where it's robotic, where he knows where he needs to go with the football every single play. And it's easier to win that way rather than try to find a Patrick Mahomes, a Dak Prescott, a Jalen Hurts in the draft, and then fill in with weapons, knowing that you got to pay this guy eventually. How do you sort of see this for fantasy football going forward?
I think you make an interesting point there, Eric, that maybe we will see people invest more in the car than in the driver. You know what I mean? Like everything is the machinery around Brock Purdy is so good. And it seems like, I don't want to say that you could plug Zach Wilson into that system and he would be doing what Brock Purdy is doing, but it's certainly making Brock Purdy's job a lot easier. And it's going to be an interesting test case this year because I think people view Caleb Williams as a difference maker and Drake May to a slightly lesser degree as a difference maker. And then you've got a lot of mystery box guys here with, Jaden Daniels, really interesting playmaker, but kind of a one-year wonder and an older prospect. Michael Penix, who's like, kind of has a little Jameis Winston to him, a more mobile Jameis Winston, like
which we like for fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. McCarthy,
but for the NFL, it might be different.
Yeah, so like there are no sure things in quarterback after probably these first two guys, and it will be interesting to see how many first-round quarterbacks we get in 2024.
Yeah. It's always this time of year as by the way, Lucas Haversick hits a field goal for the Rams with 10:23 to go in the first half. Rams taking a 10-0 lead on New Orleans here. Cooper Kupp just missing a touchdown catch on third down. I think this time of year, and Pat, you've seen this. I mean, you've been covering the NFL and the NFL draft for forever. We always see like, there's going to be 5 first-round quarterbacks this year. There's going to be 6 first-round quarterbacks. Well, that doesn't usually happen. And like, I know Shadur Sanders, like as early as, or as most recent as 2 months ago, he's a slam dunk top 10 pick in the NFL draft. I haven't seen that lately.
No.
And so we'll see what happens with that going forward. I think it's very compelling to watch as FFPC redraft players, as FFPC dynasty players, as guys who are going to be participating in the Fantasy Pros Championship next year as well. I apologize. I wanted to get to so much more tonight. This is why the show should be 4 hours and not 2. Don't tell Matt Deutsch that, because he will make it 4 hours, and I can't dedicate 4 hours on a Thursday night to it. But I appreciate everything that you have brought to the table, Pat, tonight. Before we let you go, tell us where we can consume more Pat Fitzmaurice content. I know on fantasypros.com at on the X machine at Fitz_FF. Tell us what you're doing right now for Fantasy Pros and how we can make sure we're not missing any of it.
Yeah, we're riding it out through the end of the season with our week 16 and week 17 coverage, all the, the rankings, my rankings and tiers article, Derek Brown's The Primer. So we're going to take everyone through. We're going to keep doing podcasts, the Fantasy Pros Football podcast. So look for that. And, I'm already working on 2024 rankings, and we're going to have dynasty coverage throughout the off season, Eric. So keep checking in on fantasypros.com. And, thank you so much for having me. I know I steered you down some rabbit holes with the conversation, and we didn't get to everything on the sheet, but
so much fun, so much fun.
Yeah, I know we always go off in different tangents and different directions, and it's a blast. So thanks for having me, Eric, and I hope you can dodge the bug that everyone else in your family seems to be getting.
We are my wife and I, like less than 40 hours. We're going to go out and celebrate our anniversary, and hopefully neither one of us are sick for that. Enjoy your Alpha Claus. A Merry Christmas to you, a Happy New Year, Happy Holidays to you. Pat, thank you so much for joining me on the show tonight. Appreciate it.
You too, my friend. Happy holidays, Eric.
Thank you so much. That's Pat Fitzmaurice from Fantasy Pros at Fitz_FF. Tyler Soto was the man behind the glass tonight. I'll get out right now. I know we're over time. MyFFPC.com is where to go. For everything FFPC Weekly Challenge, FFPC Playoff Challenge. We'll be back live next week at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. We're going to keep the Fantasy Pros thing going. Nate Polvote is going to be joining me next week for 2 full hours. The Best of the Better Sports Network is up next. Enjoy the rest of the game tonight. I'll see you in the Better Cast. All you viewers, thank you so much for all your kind words. Thank you so much for all your questions. Good luck in Week 16. Get in that championship game next week, and we'll talk with you then. Thank you so much. This is the Better Sports Network.